stories in the back of the book. Great story. This meeting is hosted by the District 3B3C Accessibilities Committee and is a senior-friendly meeting. We're friendly to any alcoholic, no matter what age. And my name is Rosie. I am an alcoholic, and through the grace of God in this program, I've been sober since October 1st, 1991, and I'm truly, truly grateful for that. And I'm in Austin, Texas, and District 3B3C represents all the groups in Austin, north and south of the river. We got a river that runs right in the middle of Austin. So just to give you a little scope of the Accessibilities Committee, accessibility challenges apply to all alcoholics who have difficulties participating in AA, whether those are mental, physical, geographic, cultural, or other factors that vary among people. Some alcoholics may experience barriers in accessing the AA message, including the literature, meetings, 12-step work, and the service structure. Whatever the access barrier may be, the goal of our committee is to find solutions to help ensure every alcoholic can participate in AA meetings, 12-step work, and AA service. The committee is providing this meeting by extending the hand of AA to older alcoholics to offer hope to a population that is all too frequently isolated and fearful, especially now. The support and recovery that the Fellowship of AA offers can be the doorway to a new life, regardless of one's age. This meeting will be held every Wednesday night at 6 to 7 p.m. Central Time. Let's have a moment of silence, followed by the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. And the AA Preamble, Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy. Neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. So the format for this meeting is we have a guest speaker for the first 30 minutes or the first half. Go a little bit over that is okay. And then we'll open up to discussion on the last part of the meeting. So the lack of profanity offends no one. Please remember that. And tonight, it's my honor and privilege to introduce to you, this pandemic has just brought so many blessings into my life, and one of the greatest, biggest blessings I've gotten is to a whole new fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous exists on Zoom, and in particular, this meeting that I attend every night practically, called the Big Book Solutions Group. And I've just met so many wonderful, wonderful members of Alcoholics Anonymous through that group and in that group. And I've gotten to know our speaker tonight from that group. Mind you, we've never met in person. And he lives in Mississippi and I live in Texas. So, but I have really gotten to know him just from our group and his shares, and he's just a wonderful gentleman that I've met in Alcoholics Anonymous. So without further ado, I introduce to you Henry M. from Morton, Mississippi. Thank you, Henry.
Thank you, Rosie. You've got to know me well enough to know that Christ had 12 apostles, and if there's not at least 12 people here, I'm going to have to come back on another night. Okay. I'm Henry, and I am an alcoholic. By the grace of God in this program, I've been sober since February the 1st of last year, and that is a miracle. And I hope my humor didn't offend anybody, but it's kind of, I'm poking fun at myself because part of my story and part of my alcoholism is this overinflated delusional ego that I'm just really something special and important. And I mean, I can look back at it now and see it really started in elementary school. I mean, I was a type, rather than join the Cub Scouts, I'd rather form my own club so I can run it, tell everybody what to do, how to do it, when to do it. And, you know, and naturally, since I started it, I'm in charge. You know what I mean? That was just, when I look back at it now in relation to what I had to do to stay sober, I see that I was an alcoholic before I ever took a drink. And the first drink, I used to say I was 14, and but actually I got to thinking about it, and I was in 5th grade when we lived in Italy, when the landlord where we lived, you know, took me down to his wine cellar and said, "Hey, Davino," you know what I mean? And I got to sample a little of his homemade wine, and he didn't let me have enough to get drunk, but, you know, he was going to let me taste it, and I could remember the feel of it going down my throat and all that. That was quite pleasant. And remember later that year, there was some big gathering. I don't remember what it was for. A lot of the people from the American school, and everybody's, you know, the adults drinking wine. There's table wine on every table. And, well, some of us kids got together. I mean, table wine was just available for everybody. So we started sipping a little wine. And one of them out of the group, he got pretty tipsy. And I remember one of the moms just coming up, just reading us the riot act, you know what I mean? While the grape stain was all over her upper lip, and I can remember there as an 11-year-old looking at her like, well, there you are, been swilling the wine and feeling good, and, you know, but you're fussing at us about it. So let me just achieve the legal age, you know what I mean, and I won't have to listen to that anymore. But I didn't wait to achieve the legal age. By age 14, I really found out what I could do with alcohol when nobody was there to watch over or try to limit what I was taking in. And what I would do was drink into a blackout, because the first time I really drank, other than sneaking that sip or being given a sip of wine, the next thing I remembered was coming to on the bathroom floor and not knowing where I was or what had happened. And was at a friend's house whose parents were gone, and we raided his dad's well-stocked bar by taking a little sip of each bottle, because we couldn't just steal a bottle from him. He'd noticed that missing, but we could take a sip out of bourbon, gin, vodka, you know, everything down the line and the various brands. And I can remember having that really good feeling that lasted for a minute there. We were on cloud 9, you know, and until I was so sick the next day. And, you know, the thing that really dawned on me was, you know, it was drinking that wine after drinking all that other that made me so sick. And if next time we just, you know, stick with the one kind of liquor, you know what I mean, then maybe that won't happen. Where the difference between me and somebody like my older brother was, I remember the first time he came home where he got knee-crawling drunk at a senior party. They were celebrating with champagne. He was sick as a dog the next day, and you know what? He didn't ever want to do that again. To this day, you know, he'd go out to eat, and he might drink one beer, one glass of wine, and that's it. One, that's all. Where me, I was just figuring out how to do it to get to that good feeling, but try to avoid, you know, the negative repercussions of waking up not knowing where you are. I never was successful at that, but I spent a lot of years trying. I joke at first, you know, as a teenager that we'd joke about being weekend alcoholics, because it wasn't a daily practice then, but by God, you know, come the weekend, I was going to set out to do what I wanted to do. And naturally, even then, you know, the consequences of going from a straight A student minister's son to the one that's in trouble and failing school. And I won't, there's not enough time to go into the litany of horror that I put my parents through for a number of years, but suffice it to say, by age 16, my dad and I had butted heads to the point that it was like my way or the highway, and I said, see you. So I lived on my own from that time on. But things went from bad to worse. By the time I was 19, I kind of wanted to come back home and do something different other than quit school and work for minimum wage. And I asked my dad about coming home, and he'd never been to Al-Anon or anything, and he didn't really know what alcoholism was, but he just looked at me and said, no. Why? What's going to be different? You're not coming home in my new career as an Army chaplain to come down there and put me through the same hell you put me through when I was the Baptist preacher in Dayton. He said, however, I have some suggestions you could make. You could get your GED, go back to school, join the Army, so on and so forth. Sounded like some good things, and I said, sure, I'll do that. None of which included being treated for alcoholism, because I don't think he was really aware of what that was. He just, to him, I guess it was a moral question more than a disease scenario. But anyway, long story short, I did all that. That was when I came to Mississippi. And, my dad pulled a nasty prank on me because he drops me off in Decatur, Mississippi. I had no vehicle. I'm staying there in the dorm. Well, every little town in New England I grew up in had 3 or 4 little bars or pubs, you know what I mean, within walking distance around the corner. And I start walking around looking for the place where I can, as I would say back then, get a cold beer. And I can't find any place. I didn't realize that Dry County still existed, and he had dropped me off without a vehicle in a dry county. And I was like, all right, I got to fix this right quick. Which way is the nearest beer? I finally asked somebody, and I had to hitchhike to go get it. And soon found out my roommate at the college there liked to drink beer and all as well, and he had a vehicle. So the geographic cure of leaving New England, coming to Mississippi, lasted about that long. Time rocked on. I did finish the 2-year junior college there, and in the National Guard. Actually made it all the way through officer candidate school because that was one of my goals. See, I couldn't just be a regular person in the Army. I was going to have to go to officer candidate school where I could run things and tell other people what to do. So I got the commission, joined into that, rocking along, and got to be a real problem though, because these weekend drills were a real interference with my weekend drinking. Of course, by that time, it wasn't just weekend drinking. My weekends were kind of closing in toward the middle by this stage of my life. This was about 1983, 84. So what I decided to be the best thing to do after working that hard to get a commission, going through the basic course, and I was a field artillery officer, but they kind of frowned on people being drunk on duty when you're firing howitzers that fire a 95-pound projectile that explodes and puts shrapnel out for a 100-yard radius and turns everything there into Swiss cheese. That they kind of like the person doing that to be sober. And before I got into any serious trouble with that, I thought best to just resign. So I did that. At the time, I was living in a little place. I had managed to scrape together a good deal where I could buy a few acres of land. And once again, I always had to do something different. Didn't have a lot of money, but I had a chainsaw and an axe, so I'd knock me a house together just out of trees. Built the old style log cabin and was living there and doing construction work. And I just kind of forgot that it'd be kind of important to pay the little bit of money I'd borrow for some of the lumber that I couldn't hew out of the trees. And long story short, I wound up losing that place, losing the vehicle that I had. But before I lost the vehicle, one night I kind of just really lost my mind because, it was just pitiful, always going through, working as a carpenter, working so hard for your money, but it's never enough to do anything. It barely gets you through the weekend, much less the next week. And one Saturday night I was coming home after being out, running with the guys, doing my thing, and, thought about it that I'm flat broke. There's no groceries at the house. And there's a grocery store right there in town that people tell me have been broken into 2 or 3 times, and they've never caught them. So I figured, good alcoholic thinking, well, it must be easy then So I decided I'd go ahead and do that and get me some groceries after midnight when the store was closed. And that didn't turn out too well because the Pelahatchie police called that business burglary and got arrested for that. And it just so happened that a friend of mine that had been working with me that had just recently gotten into AA. And when that happened, the sponsor he was working with was somebody that knew from the community, and they talked to the right folks and said, you know, we think this guy, I don't know, I don't think he's just a hardened criminal type. I think he's an alcoholic, and if you sobered him up, he wouldn't be doing his grocery shopping when the stores closed after midnight anymore. So let's give him a shot. And so when I went to court, they dropped the charge to trespassing and gave me 30 days in the county jail, and then court ordered me to a treatment center. Now, up to this point, the only thing I knew about AA or the 12 steps, I'd heard of it, and that was about it. I had attended one AA meeting during this coming up for the court deal and all coming up. But when I got there, I'll just tell you the truth, that was my first AA meeting ever. I listened to these people and the talk and the way they talked, and, you know, everywhere from the little old ladies to I said, you people are all just, y'all are really, really out of your minds. You know what I mean? Y'all probably need to be here in this little cult, but I just had some bad luck, and I think I can get it straightened out on my own here, and no thank you. So I went on down to the treatment center, and 28 days, had to be there, or I could go back and spend another 6 months in the county lockup. So I figured I'm going to try to get along and go along, but I was not really interested in what they were selling. But after, I don't know, 8 or 9 days there, the head kind of clearing up a little bit, you know, physically detoxed at least. And, well, being the son of a Baptist preacher, I figured, you know, the only way God's going to speak to me is going to be through, like, Jacob putting out the fleece, or the handwriting's got to be on the wall. You know what I mean? You got to show me something dramatic, you know what I mean? Nothing like being arrested and your life going to hell, you know, but I need a sign, God. Give me a sign, you know? So they happened to have Bibles in there in that treatment center, along with the big book, which I hadn't cracked open. And I said, God, if you really think if there's something here I'm supposed to be listening to, I'm going to flop this book open, and you show it to me. There's going to be something apparent right there that has to do with the situation I'm in. And I flopped the book open, and happened to open to a certain parable about somebody that built his house on the rock and it stood, and the one that built his house on the sand and it washed away. And I was like, yeah, I can see how that parable could kind of apply to my life. Yeah, my house has kind of been built on sand. It's gone. I'm in jail and down here. But yet, no, it could have flopped open any number of parables. Like, that doesn't really mean anything. But in that state-run treatment center at the time, the next morning was a Sunday, and they had a little chaplain come in going to preach a service, and he gets up to the podium and flops his Bible open and starts reading this passage about a man that built his house on a rock and it stood, and a man that built his house on sand and it washed away. And I was kind of like, that's just a coincidence. Now, I mean, you know, my dad was a preacher. I heard him preach on that, you know, plenty of times. So I'm still not convinced that there's anything out there really trying to tell me anything. Well, that afternoon, the Sunday paper came in, and I'm not normally a newspaper reader, and I'm sure not a horoscope reader. But for some reason that day, I just flipped open the paper to the horoscope, and there under my birth month, it says, be willing to tear down in order to rebuild on a more suitable foundation. And I'm like, okay, that's 3 times in 24 hours. I got the same message when I asked for something. Maybe all this is coincidence. I don't know. Or maybe there's something out there trying to tell me that maybe I ought to sit up and pay attention to what's going on here. So I went through the rest of that treatment process, you know, really trying to, came to believe, at least in that process, that there was something to it, and that there was something to a disease called alcoholism that had a lot to do with the state of my being at the time. The only problem was that the treatment centers at that time, the big thing was carry you up to step 5 and then out the door. Step 5 was your graduation ticket. And so I did up to the 5th step, but like I've shared in meeting before, my thing was that there's some things I'm just not going to tell, this counselor that I'm doing this fifth step with. Not happening. Okay. You know what I mean? I can do enough to have gone through the motions and get the star pupil award that, wow, you know what I mean? He did such a great job with all his paperwork and everything, and all looks good, but I'm taking that out the door with me. Thank you. And I don't see any need in that. And the other thing was that when I got out, and it's not the point blame, but just the sponsorship lineage, I guess, that I was involved with then, the man that became my sponsor, he was kind of the same thing, out of the treatment center, step 1 through 5 and out the door. And nobody ever asked me about step 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, the rest of that. And the rest of that just, it was kind of like, okay, now don't drink and go to meetings. And that lasted, I could get a few months put together like that. And then invariably, I would wind up getting drunk again. I don't remember how many times, this was in the late 80s. I probably went through several, 4 or 5. I think I picked up a couple of 6-month ships. And then after a year or so of that, I said, I'm not fighting it anymore. I'm just going back to what I was doing. And I did for a number of years there. In the meantime, I'd married a woman and had 2 stepsons. Had gone back, going to finish a bachelor's degree, trying to get my life straightened back out, but I was dragging me and my active alcoholism through that, and it just wasn't working. And something just hit me in 1991. My oldest stepson, my wife at the time, came and said, Everett told me that he thinks you're an alcoholic because you drink every day. And I was kind of thrown by that. That kind of took me back a couple of years. And here I am now trying to play the role of stepdad, and I'm carrying on this kind of example for him. And I went back to that other sponsor and got back into another treatment center. Same thing, steps 1 through 5 and out the door. Only this time I decided I'd do a little better job on that 5th step and leave the garbage behind. But the problem was, came back out, and nobody ever said anything, and I never got into the book enough to see that the program didn't end at step 5. Now that worked a little better that time because I got myself into a situation with my schooling and all, and managed to land a job as a clinical assistant at a treatment center. They let you start working there when you were a year sober. So I started then as a clinical assistant. And of course, then now you kind of gave you some motivation if you wanted to keep your job and do all that. You were around, people in the program, but I still wasn't really working a program. And the worst part of it was that with my personality and my ego and arrogance, my education, and now I work in a treatment center, I'm going to straighten out this family I married into. And the oldest boy now, he's starting to drink and fool with drugs, and everything that my wife would fail to do or fail to look at, it was like I just became an unbearable SOB to deal with, and it wound up destroying that marriage and family. It was time to, I don't know, it rocked on from there. I had a slip after the divorce, and it wasn't until several years later of going to the meetings, of griping about your day, griping about your ex, griping about this, that a gentleman kind of sidled up to me walking out the door after one of my gripe sessions and leaving the meeting, said, "Why don't you try working the steps?" And I kind of jerked like I'd been slapped, because, like, what do you mean telling me, why don't you try working the steps? I mean, here I am, got all this education, of worked in treatment centers and everything else, and you're going to tell me, why don't I try working the steps? And I said, well, why don't you tell me how? And that gentleman became my sponsor, and he started me over at step 1. And we started working the steps. And the thing was, he had me do that made a difference. He had me start from day 1 doing step 10 and 11. He said, you're going to start doing that now while we start over with step one. Here's some things you read every day. Here's some things you write every day. Here's what you do. And it was amazing the quality of sobriety that took place during the time when I did that. The problem was I didn't continue it. That went on for a while. In the meantime, I had remarried my son's mother, and as things started to kind of get shaky in that marriage, the shakier they got, the less I did what I needed to do, and I just quit working any kind of program. Before long, I quit attending any kind of meeting, and give myself a couple of years of that, and stressed out over life that people just won't do right. People, you know what I mean. Once again, I can't control, you know, make people do what I know is right to do. You see, I had it all backwards. My prayer and my spirituality was like, God, give me the power to implement my will, because I know what's right. You know, instead of asking for Him for knowledge of His will and the power to carry that out, it wasn't consciously, but what I was doing was saying, give me the power to do my will, instead of having the humility to say that I don't know, until you lead, guide me into what the next thing to do is. I would just take the bull by the horns, and I'm going to straighten it out. And I always made a mess when I did. That first glass of wine that I decided to have 8 years ago, when that started falling apart, the level of progression that went on from then was frightening. Because I'd been sober without a drink for 10 years. And it didn't immediately, the cunning, baffling, powerful nature of this disease, it was like, I had that big glass of wine and it took the edge off. You know what? It made it a lot easier to go home and have to deal with what I was dealing with. And I said, you know, and I didn't just go get drunk. The roof didn't fall in. I felt better than I'd felt in a long time. I think I'll try that again. And it didn't take long before keeping that feeling required drinking 24/7 when I was awake. I was either drinking or I was passed out from drinking, and then when I came to, it would be drinking again. The last couple of years in particular, it had, you know, progressed to the point that I don't think I drew a sober breath in going on 3 years. And the thing is, my tolerance for alcohol that had built up along with it, when I got the DUI that finally shook me out of my fog to come back to the solution, the officer said I was at 0.24. And if you'd just asked me, I was just feeling good. I just was finally to the point where I felt, you know, a little better than normal. But I was 3 times the legal limit, and I know the legal limit is what I woke up with every morning, 0.08 blood alcohol level. I needed a drink to keep from shaking. That wasn't enough to even keep me functioning. And I knew at the point, they talk about in this program, you know, that you have a choice between accepting spiritual help or going on to the bitter end. And the sad part for me during that time, when I look back at it, what was so frightening about the power of this disease was that I knew where the solution was. I had experienced the solution. The time I worked with that sponsor where I was actually working this program. And I knew that the way I was drinking and the amount I was drinking, there was no way that it was going to last long that way. I could feel it physically. I knew my liver was swollen. I knew that the gastric reflux that I hadn't had to take any medicine for in the last year. They had told me you're going to wind up bleeding out. You know, it's just a matter. I knew it was going to be the end, and it was like I just accepted that okay, that's how it's going to be. That's how I'm going to die. That's what's in the cards for me. And the only thing to this day is hard to understand how I could be so entrenched in that mindset. Plenty of other consequences going on, but something about when I got that DUI, when my son behind me here was in the van with me, and he had to watch and put the handcuffs on me, take me away. He had to stay there with the law. And the next day, when I was thinking about that, you know, I wasn't just being so self-centered that I was going to drink my own life away. I was drinking his life away. The impact that what I was doing, what it would have on him, God just somehow let that get through the fog enough. And because of where I knew the answer lay, it let me walk back into that meeting. And I almost left that meeting, because when I walked back in there, the meeting I used to attend regularly, nobody there. There was only a handful, and none of them were anyone that I knew from before. And I don't say this as a criticism to them, but I say it as something to remind me how I want to be in AA, because nobody gave me much but a passing nod as I walked in and sat down over in the corner with my hand shaking to where I couldn't hold a cup of coffee. And I was sitting there saying, do I stay or do I go? I'm listening to them have their little side conversations, and I was this close to saying, the hell with this. This was a bad idea. I'm leaving. And about the time I thought that, in walked through the door two gentlemen that were there from before that had been sober that whole time. One of them been sober for 28 years now, the man that became my sponsor. And when they walked in and I saw their faces, and I could see the joy, and I could see the health, and I could see the contentment and serenity they had, that something just broke loose in me, that look what you walked away from, look what's available to you. And the greatest feeling I had was that I am home now. I had made it home, and I don't want to leave. I'm going to grab onto this with both hands and not let go. And the greatest thing about it today is that what I found is that the simple things that I had failed to do in the past that are required for me to stay sober are not that onerous. It's not that difficult. And it gives so much more in return than what I have to put into it, that it's like, why wouldn't you do it? It's a kind of a no-brainer today. And like I said, what's just the baffling part to me is why did it take so long to get back to that? I don't know. I just thank God that I did, because otherwise my worry would be being told by my son how he came home from school one day and found his dad where he'd stroked out, still laying in the bed or laying out in the yard with the buzzard pecking his eyes out, because that's about where I was headed. And I thank God that no matter what happens today, at least that doesn't have to be the end story he gets to tell his kids about their grandfather. That there'll be something a little better than that he can share with them. And I think I've hit about 30 minutes there, so I'll wind it up with that. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Henry. That was awesome. That was really incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, strength, and hope, Henry. And your story is so incredible, and I was going to say unique, but I'm sure there's a lot of people that have struggled just like you, going in and out. So I know that everybody's experience is a treasure, and that it's going to be used to help another alcoholic that's experiencing the same experience that you have. And I just want to welcome anybody that came in a little bit late in the intro there. And I just want to say again that I thank you, Henry, for sharing. I met Henry at the Big Book Solutions group. That group meets every night at 8 o'clock to 9:30, and it's a really fantastic meeting. Henry and I had never met each other in person, but we've been listening to each other every night since this pandemic started. And I really do believe that meeting has been a huge blessing in this pandemic for me. and for many others too, I'm sure. So thank you again for sharing that, Henry. And so we're going to open the meeting now for anybody that would like to share. And before I open it up, I do want to announce that Mr. Steve Looney is going to be our speaker next Wednesday night. This meeting is every Wednesday at 6 o'clock. So who would like to share first? Steve Key from Phoenix, would you like to share first, sir?
Sure, I'm Steve. I'm not Paul. Hi. My sobriety date is November 19th of 79, and there's no one more surprised about that than I am. I'm one of those people who is never able to stick with anything for any long period of time. Can you hear me okay? Sometimes this mic doesn't go great. No?
It's a little muffled. We can barely hear you.
Okay, is it any better now? Go to somebody else and I'll switch mics.
Okay. Max P is here. Hi there.
Hello, Rosie. How are you? Nice to be here. I came in late. My name is Max. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is June 16th, 1981. I live here in Charleston, South Carolina. And Henry, I really enjoyed that. Yeah, I couldn't get on until about 15 minutes, but you know, I love that you're doing it differently now, and you're in a completely different state. And I really love when you talked about when those two guys walked in the meeting. I totally get that, you know, and it was like you're about to leave, and the two guys walk in, and it's like inside something changed. You know, I totally get that. I mean, there's so many times I could have not made it in the early time, and I also did the first 5 steps, and I very luckily got involved. Like where I got sober, they were into the steps. And you know, I talk about it all the time. I've never ever been away from any AA where they didn't talk about the steps. So I didn't even, you know, it's funny. In my first year in Louisiana, I don't even think I heard don't drink and go to meetings one time. So I joined the World Famous Mamaroneck group. And that was kind of a raised thing. But man, that was good stuff, Henry. And I knew you were a sick alcoholic, but you know, you just proved it. That was good to hear a little more of the details. You know what I mean? So, yeah, man, I love talking to you on the phone and getting to know you and the whole group. So thanks for letting me share, Rosie.
Thank you, Max. Brenda, would you like to share?
Sure. My name is Brenda, and I'm an alcoholic, and I live in the Austin area, and just met Rosie recently, which is really awesome. I had moved here from Boise, Idaho, where I got sober. My sobriety date is November 1st, 2000. And I also had a 10-year decade between that first meeting in 2000 and my last meeting, you know, was 10 years earlier, and I was not sober during that time. And, you know, I had a mental twist that I wasn't really an alcoholic. I quit doing my step work, you know, left the program in a 9th step, you know, wouldn't finish my amends, and my disease, my thinking took right over again. And there was nothing anybody, including myself, I was beyond human aid, you know, before I even went back out at that point. You know, it was like it had taken over. And I drank, like I said, for another 10 years before I came back. And I will say, though, through that experience, my last 2 years of that was really desperately trying to either quit or control it. You know, if I'm not an alcoholic, why do I drink like this? You know, so it's amazing to me what my mind can tell me and do. And when I came back in, I've never since then said, even then, that I will never drink again. You know, I did not swear off or anything like that, because I know in my heart that I don't have the power to do that. And if I stay sober, it's a gift of God. And the thing that I was most afraid of was my own thinking, because I believe it. It tells me insane things and I believe it. And I needed a solution for that. Drunk or sober, I need a solution for that, which the steps have offered. It offers me a way to keep that channel open, or when it gets blocked, by resentment, fear, self-seeking, all that crap, that is my normal MO and is a normal way of living. Even if it's unhappy, it's mine, um, the power that I found in here to be able to tap into that power, and not just tap into it and keep it, because that's what I tried to do the first couple times in AA. I wanted to make a better me, I wanted to hold on to it and like, yeah, now I'm going to do all the things that I want to do in life, and it didn't work. It turns out that without that, having some fellowship with other people in order to be able to learn from each other, and then find those other people who are still suffering, those other women. If I'm not giving this away, I don't get to keep it. So anyway, thank you, Henry, very much for your share, and thanks for calling on me, Rosie. That's all I have.
Thank you, Brenda. I'm so glad you're here. Belinda, would you like to share? Are you there?
Yes, thank you. I'm Belinda, an alcoholic. My sobriety date is January the 3rd, 2008, and I'm living in the East Texas area, Crockett, and I'm having a little stomach bug or something tonight. I think I'll listen. Thank you, though.
Okay, Belinda, thank you for being here anyway. Steve K., you want to try again? I heard that you were sober in 1979, so I'd really like to hear you.
Hi, can you hear me better now?
That's much better, yeah.
All right, thank you, folks. Yeah, I'm Steve, I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is November 19th of 79. I live in Phoenix, but I got sober in Dallas. And I was one of those people, I believe I was fortunate in that I never was able to drink socially. I drank alcoholically from the get-go. I started when I was in high school, and joined the Navy shortly after that. And we never set out to drink socially. And after I got out of the Navy and got married, all of a sudden my drinking was a problem, because my wife was a teetotaler, and she didn't understand why I had to get drunk 3 or 4 nights a week. And at that point, I didn't either. I thought that now that I'm married, I'll settle down, and I don't need to drink as much as I did. But it soon became apparent that I couldn't control it. And we had a son, and when he was about 10 months old, my wife said that I'm not going to raise my son in this environment. You obviously chosen here over our family, so we're going to move on. And they did, and I'm not proud of that, but I chose beer over them. And I drank for another 3 years until it got to the point where this is when I had moved to Dallas for work. And all of a sudden, I had no family or friends there, and I was unsupervised. So my drinking escalated quite a bit. And it got to the point where I worked Monday through Friday. And on Saturday morning, I would get up and have a cup of coffee and then start drinking, because I knew I wanted to go out Saturday night, but I also knew I couldn't stay sober all day. And after I did that for about 3 months, it dawned on me that this was not a good way to live, and that I really wanted to do something different. So I didn't really know anything about Alcoholics Anonymous, except you folks didn't drink. So I called the local office of AA and spoke with a lady there. I can't remember much of anything she said other than where the meeting was that night, but I do know she did not say that this was a lifelong commitment and you guys were going to be talking about God. Had I heard that from her, I probably would not have come in when I did. Was not really interested in either one of those. I just wanted to, I wanted people
Oh, Steve, I think you froze up now. Dadgummit. Um, okay, we'll come back to him maybe. Matt, would you like to share with us, sir?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Rosie. Mad alcoholic. April 21st of 1990 is my sobriety date. Henry, it's great hearing you speak. I try to attend. I call you a Zoom home group member of mine, so I try to support those and pop in if I hear someone from the home group's going to speak somewhere. So it helps me get to know the people better. So I appreciate that. It's great. So a couple of things just like really jumped out at me that I could definitely relate to. My sponsor, he has pounded into my brain over the years that steps 4 through 9 is how you establish a foundation for your lifetime. And if you skip on those, don't worry about doing 10, 11, 12. So, and another thing that he helped me understand was, and I found out that it was true for me too. If I don't really do a thorough effort at those 4 through 9 steps, I'm probably going to start heading out of AA. I may not be like literally like stepping out of AA, but I won't be in the middle of it, right? So I definitely relate to that part of your story. The progression and the relapse. I'm grateful that I have not relapsed, and I definitely pay attention and feel a lot of empathy for those who do, and I try to learn from their experiences. Made me think of something I learned this in Pennsylvania AA. They used to say, if you like what you're getting, keep doing what you're doing. So if you don't like what you're doing, what do you think you need to do? It's just kind of like dirt simple, but it really worked for me. And then you model your behavior on those who are happy, joyous, and free. The idea of having a good, solid sponsor, that's something I look for. I've had the same sponsor for a number of years, and he definitely helps keep me on the narrow. The 3 legacies kind of idea, and then I'll just close with this: is the God instances and coincidences, right? So I remember when I came in to AA, I didn't want anything to do with religion or God. I was frankly disappointed when I learned that AA was based in higher power, God, principles, whatever you want to call it. I'm fine calling it God by now, but someone had told me to pay attention, and when you see a coincidence, think about it. Maybe it's a God instance, right? And so it is neat to hear you tell your story about this three times in a row about a house built on sand, foundation washes away. So, Henry, man, it was great hearing you. I appreciate your talk. Thank you for calling me, Rosie. Thank you. Good to see everybody.
Thank you, Matt. I'm so glad you're here. David R. Sorry.
That's okay. I'm David Russell. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is also the class of 79, August 23rd of 79. I belong to the Big Book Solution group, singular. It's a solution. Anyhow, I really appreciated hearing you, Henry. I was looking forward to this evening, and I'm looking forward to the next week of Looney Tunes commercial. Anyhow, I could identify with your share. I did not relapse, unfortunately. I came in and they talked about this God thing, and I thought you were very nice people, but I just had such a dislike for a higher power. I was so repulsed by this religion type stuff. I just turned out of my head, but something that they said helped me stay here, and I was in trouble, and the words that they used to say from day to day to day to day helped me. And I was listening, and I remember the set aside prayer. God help me set aside the things that I think I know about you and the steps and all that, and help me remind me of what you said, that be willing to discard this foundation and be open to a more solid foundation. So that's about it. I love you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David. Well, Mr. Looney, you want to give us a little preview?
I will. Thanks, Rosie, and thank you, Henry. Really appreciate it. And I'm Steve. I'm an alcoholic. by God's grace, love, and mercy, hadn't had a drink since May 31 of '89. And Solutions is my Zoom home group, and my regular home group is the Hope Club, a Hope group down in Cedar Park, but I think that's going to be changing. I don't know. Sometimes us alcoholics aren't the best in relationships. I know I'm not, but best things ever happened to me in my life is when I threw up my arms and laid my cards on the table and walked into Alcoholics Anonymous and meant business. I've been here before. I've been there before, and I went into, say the right thing, but not do the right walk. And I wanted to get the probation officers off my back, my family off my back, her off my back, everybody off my back, so I could go out and drink some more. That's all I really wanted to do, and that's what I really wanted to do up until I was 33 years old. But I remember that first drink when I was sixth grade. Knew older people, and they were seniors in high school, and they were out running around because it was almost the end of school, and they stopped and harassed me, and I told her, well, give me a drink of that Coors, brewed in land 1100 Springs. And I took a drink of that, and on my way back to school, and school seemed a whole lot more fun. I didn't mind sitting in the class the rest of the afternoon, and I liked the way it made me feel, obviously. Right there from that very first sip of Coors, I probably was an alcoholic from that very first time going forward, because I liked the way it made me feel. And that's what and the rest of the time, that's what I drank for. But my alcoholic history had pretty much one thing in common. I took a drink, got drunk, got sick, and got in trouble. The last time I took a drink, I got sick, and I got in trouble. And got drunk too, and so trouble and my drinking all went together. And my sobriety date is the same as my jail date. They run right together, and thank God in heaven for giving me one more chance. And that's what I think I've got, is this one more chance. And of course that was 31 years ago, and been able to stay out of jail and maybe help somebody every now and then, and have a peace of mind and a contented heart. And there's no price tag on that. That's priceless. That's what I've been able to experience through Alcoholics Anonymous, because when I took a drink, it would calm that turmoil, that inner turmoil, that whatever's going on down here and up here. It made everything really nice, until that day came. And it's probably my last year of drinking. It was really ugly, and the things I did were really ugly. And but through AA and the 12 steps, I found this power greater than myself, and that was what the whole thing is about. From what I've gathered through the literature, that it is helping us bring our will into agreement with God's will. And for me, being an alcoholic through the 12 steps, the only way I was going to get it. That's the only way I was going to get there. But it's a one day at a time deal for me. And I got to pray and come to speaker meetings, big book meetings, and step meetings. And my sponsor said, you do that every week. If you got time to go to an open discussion, go right ahead. So this is where, I got and found out how all y'all were staying sober one day at a time. And I appreciate it, Henry. Thank you so much. And Rosie, thanks for chairing, and look forward to seeing y'all maybe tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Well, we are out of time. But Joyce, I know you came in late. You want to just tell us who you are and where you're from?
I'm Joyce. I'm an alcoholic. I am from Jackson, Mississippi. My sobriety date is October 22nd, 2000. Sorry, I missed your speech, your talk, Henry. the way I got sober myself, it was going to a lot of speech meetings, like the end of the week meetings, the speech meetings. That's what I'm calling them, like what you did tonight. And it just through that one night, I heard someone speak. I listened with my heart, and I was there, and it helped me with the obsession of drinking. Thank you for letting me introduce myself.
Thank you, Joyce. We're glad you're here. All right. Well, we're around the clock at the end of the meeting. Just one more time, I'll announce Steve L. will be speaking next.